It's 7 o'clock, top of the hour. We have to introduce our, well, it's our player for tonight. I don't know how else to put it. This is what's happening this evening.
It's Catanetty. Got a tip for you.
Well, wrong one came up. I wonder where it's at. There it is. Okay. Now, Bob wasn't quite ready for that, right, Bob?
Yeah. How you doing tonight?
All right, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Bob, we were all supposed to turn a birdhouse tonight to show you our birdhouses since you're going to show us something. I haven't heard anybody talk about their birdhouse. I clean forgot about it.
I actually
what's on the cap for tonight?
I'm going to turn a multi-axis birdbath tonight.
Nice.
What I'm going to turn, I'll show you a picture. These are some that I've turned in the past that I've colored. I'm not going to color one tonight because coloring takes quite a bit of time. But just want to show you some to get some ideas of different things that we can do with them. You'll go to the next picture. And this is one I turned out of a piece of poplar. The first one was a piece of oak and it's colored. This is a piece of poplar that was spalted and had some, a lot of grain in it. And this is a piece of cherry. But this is what we're going to turn tonight, and we'll show you how I do it. I learned from Doug Fisher out of Canada. Yeah. Okay, that's the back of one. And I learned these from Doug Fisher out of Canada. He came to the North Carolina symposium and did a four rotation demo. And then our club had him, sponsored him for a 2-day workshop, and he taught us how to do these. I've got a chuck that I made. Show that first, that other chuck. Go to that other chuck. All right, this is a chuck that I made out of a piece of 4-inch PVC connector and a piece of, I guess it's cherry or maple. And what I did was I turned it and turned this around, the disc round, and then recessed it, then threaded it. And then I turned a recess in it and slid the connector onto it. That's one way you could do it. But since then, I found something I like a little better, that I just put this on my regular chuck. This is a, what's the name on that? It's a PVC connector. And I sent a text to Dane, if he'll put in the chat, that he put a where I got it at Lowe's, called a DWV connector. Goes from 4 inches to 3 inches, and then I put a piece of 3-inch pipe on the inside and glued it in with CA, just so that I can either use this on a Talon chuck, or I can use it on the Stronghold chuck. Or if you have the Nova chucks, you could use it on any chuck, but I did that so I could use it on a smaller chuck or a larger chuck. And with this, I do some workshops on these, and we were having a problem before we did a workshop, and we used the one where we tapped it. Well, I told them they could take it home with them. It was theirs to keep if they wanted to. And I had complaints that they said, well, they didn't have a 1 1/4 inch thread on their lathe, so they couldn't use it. So this you could use, this one you could use with any chuck. First of all, what I'm going to do, I cut my blank round, and I put a circle. Got my center mark here, and I put a 3/4 inch circle here, and I marked it into thirds. You don't necessarily need to mark it into thirds. You can mark it fourths or 1 or any number you wanted to, but it sort of gives you an interesting shape, sort of a triangular shape in there on the center when you do the third. So I sort of like that. So I put it against my chuck. I've still got It's cut with a bandsaw, so I've still got to get it good and round. And what I'll do is run my tailstock up into it. And I'm just jamming it against my chuck. Some people may be more comfortable with using a drill and drilling the hole. Drilling a recess and doing it that way. If you want to do it that way, that's fine. I just tighten it real tight. And if it flies off, it's going to hit land. It won't hit me, so I'm not worried about it. And what I'm doing is just get it round, but I'm only going to round it about a ½ inch. So I'm not going to worry about the rest of it, because the rest of it I'm going to cut the back in a curve. That's where the chuck will come in. So I'm running about 1,000 RPMs. I'm just going to cut a little bit off, just enough to get it round. This is a piece of about a 10-inch piece of okay. So I've got as much as I need round. This is going to be my rim on it. Now I'll make my platter rim about 1.5 inches, and that'll give me about a 3-inch rim, or a third of the total diameter to be the rim. So I'll put a little bead here. And I'm using a 3/8 spindle gouge to do that with. We'll go in about 1.5 inches. One thing I like to do, I take just a regular tape measure and epoxy a magnet on the back of it, and that way you just stick it on my lathe, and if I remember to put it there, I can always find it. I'm going about 1.5 inches. And I also put a magnet on the pencil, and it's always handy. So this is going to be our rim here. Now we could texture that. We could leave it plain. We can put beads in it. You can do whatever you want to with it. Now part of our inside might cut into that rim. One of the neat things about these is you never know exactly what they're going to look like. So however it turns out, that's the way you planned it. That's a good thing. Okay, if I'm going to do a little texturing, I'm going to back off my tool rest a little bit. Get my texturing tool. And this is a Sorby spiraling tool. Our club makes these like this, but it's the same wheel that you get if you order from any one of the tool suppliers that the Sorby makes it. So I'm going to do a crosshatch pattern on here. And I'll start about 400 RPMs. And I'm going to start at a 45-degree angle this way, just going across. And then I'll flip it and go 45 degrees the other way. When I go 45 one way, we'll get this pattern.
Bob, what RPMs are you using?
Zoom in on that pattern.
You lost your audio. There we are.
Can y'all see that pattern? Can they see that pattern? Okay. Now I'm going to go the other way. 45 degrees. And I'll get an entirely different pattern.
About 400 RPMs.
Okay, so see, that gives us an entirely different pattern. And I like that pattern. So we're going to make a recess for our chuck now. And we'll use the parting tool to do that with. And I'm going to do it at about 3 inches because I want to leave this circle here. Eventually, I'll cut it away later, but for right now, I just want to leave it there. So I'm going about 700 RPMs. Just coming in here with my parting tool.
Camera change land, please.
And the reason I'm doing this is because when I chuck it up now, it's going to be on center.
Camera view change, please. There we go.
So we've got a recess for our chuck. Make it a little bit deeper. I don't know if my friend Mark Soleil's out there or not, but if he is, went to a demo he did in Concord last night. It's a really good demo, and if y'all get a chance, you ever get a chance to go see one of his demos, you ought to go see it. You'll learn a lot. All right, so I've chucked it up on the back. Well, this is actually the top here, so, but I've chucked it up into the recess. And so what I'm going to do now, we'll tighten both sides. I'm going to make a curve here. And it's going to curve all the way from here, from the center, all the way up to about here. It's going to be a gentle curve, that's all. And that's going to fit in my chuck, and you'll see that that's how I tilt this. I'll take my live center out because this thing has got a sensor in the tip of it, and it will find your elbow. Don't ask me how, somebody told me that. That's how I know that. Let's get this out of the way. I'm going to bring my tool rest in at an angle, and I know my centers. Right about there. So I'm going to go from there all the way out to here with that curve. Now, when I learned how to do it, Doug showed us, he used a vacuum chuck to do it. I like to use it between centers or between the chuck and and the tailstock, because that way you'll see I can, if I want to go back to a spot, I can go back. But if I'm doing it just in a vacuum chuck and not have any register on the outside, then there's no way I can go back to that point. So we use a pull cut to take this wood off. Check it, make sure it's turning good. Make sure it clears. Now, if I want to put a pattern on the back of this, I can. If I use the vacuum chuck, I can't do that. Let's raise our tool rest up a little bit. Now I'm using a pull cut to do this, and I have my hands, I'm holding my toe against my leg, and this arm is against my side, and this is against my side, so I've got a triangle here. And I'll keep that triangle all the time, and I'll move my body to move my tool with. I don't move my tool like this. I move my body. You find you get a much better cut that way. Some people like to use a push cut. Some people like to use a pull cut. You can use, whichever one you're the most comfortable with. I'll use a pull cut on the back, but I'll use the push cut on the front. You can get nice curly shavings that coming out. You see how this is curving around? Bring my tool rest around. Like I said, some people would rather use a push cut. Whichever you like better, that's fine. If you use a push cut, come in like this. You see, I don't have my hands against my body, or put my tool against my body using a push cut. I can take off some wood. This hand is doing all the, my right hand is doing all the steering. All my left hand's doing is holding it down on the tool rest. Have to raise it up a little bit. And I am one of those people that I cut off the lathe every time I move the tool rests around. Any way you can avoid an injury or a chance of an injury, you're better off doing. Now sometimes I'll do these, and this is a piece of 8-quarter wood. You can do it with that, or you could use a piece of 5-quarter wood. I've used a piece of 4-quarter before. You're just not going to get as deep of a cuts into it, but you'll still get the same effect. Nice cutting wood. I usually use light colored wood on these, because that way if I want to color it, I can. If I use like a piece of walnut, Obviously, I could very well color it, or it would be more difficult. And you notice there's no white knuckles. There's a rule against white knuckles. You got white knuckles, you're gripping it too hard. You're fighting your tool. And I'll slow down when I get to the edge because I'm cutting unsupported wood. Okay, now we'll come back with a pull cut. And this time I'm holding my handle down really low. I'm almost making a shear cut. And that's going to save me some sanding down the road. Now, Dane likes to sand a lot, but I don't, so I have to pick on him a little bit here. Okay, let's come back in this way a little bit. Now I'm riding my bevel the whole time. Even though I'm holding my tool almost straight, I'm on the bevel. I've still got a 45-degree angle, just 45 degrees this way. And as far as speeds you turn at, you should turn at the speed that you're comfortable at. I might be comfortable at a higher speed than you are. You might be comfortable at a higher speed than I am. Either one's fine. Okay, so we're going to call that done. Now, if I wanted to texture this, I could. No, I'm not going to. For the sake of time, I'm not going to. All right, so we're going to take this out of our chuck now. This is the fun part. Remembering which way to turn the key. Okay, so now we're going to use our Lowe's plumbing department chuck. And with this, one of the things I like about this, now I went to one of the dollar stores. They just got some of that sticky foam, foam stuff. They just sprayed a little adhesive on it, and it's already got some adhesive on it. Just stuck it on there. I might have got it at a big box store, but I just stuck it on there for padding. If you don't want to do that, you can get a piece of neoprene foam. Something like this, vacuum chuck. If you have a vacuum chuck, you could use that vacuum chuck instead of using this and just not hook up the vacuum to it. Because basically you've got a round chuck with your vacuum chuck. Okay, we need a live center again. Clean that out. And what we're going to do, if we were cutting flat, we would be on this center point. We ain't cutting flat. We're going to go to one of these marks. I just divided that into thirds is what I did. And I've done it with two off center on two places and off center on one place, or off center on 4 places. You know, it's just, you can do whatever your imagination lets you do. I was doing this demo one time in Greenville, North Carolina. And I put it in like this. And I started turning, see it turned very straight. So it was like everybody was sitting out front and this thing started going pretty good. And it was wobbling back and forth like this. And the Red Sea right in the middle of the room. It was hilarious. Now I'm putting it in there pretty tight. All right, so we're going to make a cut. We'll start right here. And that's cut's going to end up something like that. Does that show up on the screen? Can y'all see that? Well, you can't answer me, so I don't know if you can or not.
Yeah, we can see it.
You can? All right. Now we'll switch to a 1/2 inch gouge. Just so I got a little more room to get in there. And I guess that's the disadvantage of doing it with the tailstock, is that you can't get in as well, but you get in good enough. And we're going about 700 RPMs. You know, mark somewhere in there. And see, now I'm not cutting. I'm cutting air and I'm cutting wood. And I'm cutting this way, and then I'm coming back this way. Now the reason for that is to eliminate a lot of sanding. You see, I've made a cut right here. If I came in just this way, then my tool is coming in like this, and I'm going to have a lot of tear out here. So if I come in here, I can take that tear out of there. And see, we might go down into the rim, which is fine. Like I said, we don't know what we're going to end up with. But you'll end up with something that, when somebody looks at it, it's not a turner, that they'll have no idea how you did it. And you tell them how hard it is, and then charge them twice as much. Now, when I get to the bottom, my tool is completely closed. So it's like at 12 o'clock.
How deep are you going, Bob?
Members, Bob might be able to take your questions when the machine's running.
How deep did you go there, Bob?
Probably 3/4 of an inch, maybe. You don't want to go all the way through the bottom, because then the birds won't be able to take a bath because water will leak out. All right, let's go to another center. So we don't spend all night doing this. And you'll sort of see how they interact. Now, see, if I want to go back to that center, I've got where my tailstock was. I can go back to it at any point in time until I cut this away. And that's why I like having the chuck with the tailstock in it. So let's come in this way. I found that if I made them bigger, made that circle where I put my center point, or where I put my live center, I found if I made it much bigger than 3/4 of an inch, it sort of got too deep on one side. Let's come back this way a little bit. Now I'm holding my tool where it'll cut, but I'm not holding it so it touches the wood. Now give it a spin, make sure it clears. And I'm going about 700 RPMs. Now I'm coming back. I'm going in on one side, and I'm coming back the other way. Does that show up on camera? So we're going to go to our third center. Depends on how much weight you got on your lathe. This one started shaking at about 800. And it's a 4224. But you at home have weights on the bottom of my lathe. And so, yeah, faster speeds turn better. So we're doing 900 now. And I'm getting a little bit of vibration, but not a whole lot. Now, I taught a class at John Campbell doing these, and one of the guys used a half-inch scraper, and it gave some really neat effects. It was a little less stark lines. Now I'm backing up a little bit. Okay, so let's see what we got now. Now what I would do is I would turn this center away here. I turn it down to where I've just got that last. If I was in this center, I'd turn it down till there's just a piece here and then just grind it off. You could use I use a Proxima grinder, but you could also use like a 80 grit sandpaper and a disc. And that's sort of the pattern we've got. And like I said, this would go away when it's finished, but that's how I do those.
It's really nice.
Is there any questions?
And
How would you hold it to remove the center?
I use a either a drill with a 80 grit pad. I'll turn it down so when I would turn it, when I was finishing it, I would have maybe this much right here.
Mm-hmm.
If I was on that hole or that center, and I just use if it's just a little bit sticking out, chip some of it off and then use a sanding pad to take it off with.
Looks nice, Bob.
And
Cool.
so you could come back and you could put, go back to one of these centers and completely change the shape of it if you wanted to, or change the pattern on it.
Or add a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting.
Yeah, you could do it with it. You could grind that center out with an angle grinder or a Fordham and saber-tooth burrs. There's lots of ways to do it.
What's he saying?
What was that PVC pipe piece again?
Yeah. But I don't have all those, so I just use, I've got a Proxim grinder, so I use that. But yeah, that'd work. Anything would just grind the wood away. And then
Bob,
I'll put some kind of pattern a lot of times in the center, and when I'm coloring it, and then wood burn around that pattern. Like I might put a pattern that looks, say, well, say like that 3 circles, make that a triangle pattern, and then wood burn around it and just leave that pattern, do the whole thing in yellow, and wood burn around that so it's black all the way around the pattern.
Bob, Brenda had a question about that PVC adapter you have on your chuck.
Yeah.
And we had a couple of folks wonder if that's vacuum, but it really is a friction chuck, correct?
It's a friction chuck, not a vacuum. Yeah, it's not a vacuum chuck. The guy that taught us, he used a vacuum chuck, but that's a pressure chuck. Yeah. Now, if you have a vacuum chuck, you could use that, but then you can't. If I want to go back to one of these spots, I've got a vacuum chuck. If I'm not using my tailstock, then chance exactly that spot again.
You can still use your tailstock. I mean, I use my tailstock with my vacuum chucks all the time.
Yeah. Then you could go back. Then you've got a mark to go back to. You've got a reference.
I like the way you do it there, Bob. I appreciate it.
That was very educational. Thank you, Bob.
Very
what
good.
I'll do is I'll finish
questions
this
and
one.
comments. This is your chance.
Very cool. Thanks, Bob.
Very nice, Bob. Thank you.
Oh, is this thing working?
Okay. Oh, I'll finish this one and put it in the gallery, so it'll show up and you see what it looks like finished.
Sounds good.
But in the interest of time, I don't want to tie up the whole meeting, because then we miss some of the show and tell, and I like the show and tell part.
I'm curious as to how do you remove the tailstock marks when you get to this point?
Yes, show us. Do you have one that's completed already?
Well, I want to see how he does it.
Okay,
Completed
what I'll
one doesn't
do-
really show you the method he uses to do that.
So I had it in here. It's round. There's nothing on the back. Now, if I wanted texture back here, I could do texturing, and with this friction chuck, as we're calling it, then it wouldn't be a problem. If I was using a vacuum chuck, I couldn't put texture back here because the seal would leak. If I was using a vacuum chuck with vacuum, if I was using a vacuum chuck with the tailstock, I could still do whatever I wanted on the back.
No, I was just wondering how you remove the tailstock marks off the front of it.
He said he grinds them off.
I just grind these off. This will be the shape of the center right here. But I'll just use a grinder to take.
Bob, how long would it take to do that, to take that off now?
How long would it take to take it off now?
Well, he wants to finish the piece of wood at a later off camera.
Take this out. Probably.
It'd take him 30 seconds, guys.
Okay.
You would essentially do it just like you remove a tenon on the bottom of a bowl.
Right.
You take it down to a small section, then you either chip it off
down
with a flat chisel or you grind it off with a sanding disc.
It's going to be flat or concave? Flat or it's just slightly concave. Okay.
There you go. That's
I
perfect.
couldn't tell on a finished one.
See, I grind it down like this is. This is ground down. This was done exactly the same way, but I ground this down and then sanded it.
Thanks, Bob.
That helps
So
a lot,
this is-
Bob. Thanks.
With this gone.
I think the door is wide open when you consider that the friction chuck he has, and then if you are a great fan of a a vacuum chuck. Think about taking that center out by just rolling that back on your vacuum chuck, and then you can roll it into something and create a more centric piece in the center of it. The door is open. Bob threw ideas out there. Bob threw technique out there. The piece comes out gorgeous, but you have to follow Bob's pattern exactly.
Replacing batteries.
Because you may never see that pattern again in the entire world.
No.
No. No, just the noise.
Bob,
Thanks, Bob. That
Bob,
was
we very much thank you for this demonstration this evening, sir.
Regular. What's the other ones?
Great
We
job,
sort
Bob.
of hurried through it. Whole time, whole meeting.
Really good.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Great demo.
Thank you. Okay, there were some questions about what was left to turn off. I went ahead and finished turning this. Let me hold his right ankle.
There you go.
And you can see that's all there is to cut off, and you can knock most of that off with a chisel and then just sand the rest of it off. But that's what it's looking like right.
Very nice,
That's the
Bob.
piece we started with tonight, right, Bob?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had.
Right on.
No,
Thank
not
you, Bob.
really.
Yeah, that was the piece I started with.
All right.
That
No,
was the piece
that's
I was
fine.
working on earlier.